Yo, what is going on guys? Serious here. In today's video we're going to be starting the 7th video in the GSC scripting series. Now before we get started, if you haven't seen the previous videos, go ahead and watch them because you're going to need the code that we made for this video. Also, make sure that you get the latest version of my utility GSC. Today we did add some stuff. It's mainly just a couple fixes to make the set text work correctly. It has to do with the way the in-game function works. You won't have this issue if you were using set point on Black Ops 2 or if you were using the Infinity Loader one, but if you're using mine, there would be an issue with move over time, which I fixed. It's something really weird, and hopefully there will eventually be a cleaner fix, but for now this is just the way I've done it. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with what we're doing today. Today the goal is to be able to scroll through our menu. We're still not going to have real options yet that you can click, but we will be able to scroll up and down the menu using our scroll bar. So let's go ahead and add a quick define. The define we want is going to basically be the speed of our scrolling. So let's go ahead and define scroll delay equals 0.15. You can change this. This is just going to be basically the time in between scrolling when you're holding the button to scroll up and down. 0.15 is pretty average. I see this in a lot of menus. I prefer probably around 0.1, but it's up to you. Okay. So, first thing we need to do is add the button monitor portion. So let's go ahead and add an if statement. If self is button pressed. We'll just leave the autofill, self is button press. If you remember, this is an or statement. That means if this is true or this is true, then we do whatever's inside of here. We're going to replace these buttons with our scrolling buttons. I'm going to use the ADS button and the attack button. So I'm going to go into the GSC and basically get the values for that. ADS. And I'm actually going to put that here so that when I do this, it moves over. The next thing we're going to do is call a function we haven't created yet, scroll, self is button pressed, attack. This is basically telling it whether we want it to go up or down. We will be putting up as the value inside of scroll, so just go ahead and put whatever button you want to make it go up. For this case, it's going to be attack for me. And then we are going to wait scroll delay, which will wait whatever we define. So for me, 0.15, and then continue to skip all the code below it. If you see, this is kind of keeping it really clean, so we don't need a bunch of nasty else statements. And if you've ever seen a menu base before, a lot of the time there'll be a ton of crazy logic in here, and we just want to keep it clean and simple because we don't need any of that. So let's go ahead and make our scroll function really quickly. Scroll up. That the parameter being passed is going to be whether we want to scroll up or down. Curse equals self get cursor. Again, another function we haven't written yet, but we'll get to it in a minute. If up, we want to decrement this, so curse minus minus. The minus minus just means curse is equal to curse minus 1. It's just a shorthand. Else curse plus plus. Curse equals curse plus 1. Hopefully that makes sense. It's there's not really anything too complicated about it. Then we can do self set cursor self.submenu curse. And then we will get to these two functions that we haven't written yet. So let's go ahead and add our get cursor. Menu equals self.submenu. Now, I will mention something. Somebody asked me a question recently about the default parameters. This basically means that if this is not defined, to set it to true. If you are using GSX or GSC Studio, you can't do this. Instead, what you would do is you would just get rid of this, and you would do if not is defined menu, menu equals self.submenu. And so if you see how this is set up, hopefully this makes sense now. Basically, if menu isn't defined, we're going to use the current menu. So you would just need to do this inside of GSX or GSC Studio. Like I said, though, I'm not supporting those, so hopefully you're using Infinity Loader for this. And also, hopefully, that will explain to you how default parameters work, because they are a very useful feature. It allows you to do a lot of sanity checking without running too much logic. So we will do if not is defined, self.cursors menu, and we will do self set cursor menu. Now, one thing is we don't have this variable defined, so let's go ahead and put this in our set menu open really quickly. Or I'm sorry, our where is it? Set access. You see how we create default variables? Well, we need to make sure that we define this as an array, because otherwise the game will be using an undefined variable, and that's bad. So if we don't have a defined cursor for this menu, we will set a cursor. This is going to basically set the default cursor, and we will get to this function in a minute. And we will do return self.cursors menu. Return basically means that we are going to take whatever this value is, and whoever called this is going to get the value back. So for example, where we do curse equals self get cursor, if we return self.cursors menu, you can basically pretend it's that. Okay? The reason we make it a function is because we want to be able to use it throughout the menu, and we want to have the sanity check for whether it's defined and not have to write it over and over again. And it also calls another function. So you could just do the self.cursors menu, but it's really up to you and how stable you want your menu to be. The more sanity checking you have in your menu, the bigger the code's going to be, but the more stable it's going to be generally. That's not always true, but just write careful code. It pays off in the long run. So now we're going to make our set cursor function. Menu is equal to none. That means we're going to be setting the default menu to none in case somebody doesn't pass a menu parameter. We are going to set the default value to 0, so if it makes sense when we set cursor without a parameter, it's just going to do 0. And then we will do max equals self get max cursor. This is another function that we will write in a second. If value is less than 0, value equals max. This is to make it loop back around if our value is below 0. So basically, if you were to scroll up past the first option, it would go to the bottom option. And then we can do another statement. If value is greater than max, value equals 0. Meaning if you scrolled down, it would go back up to the first option. Then we say self.cursors, self.submenu. Actually, that's not right. It should be menu equals value, meaning we are setting the cursor of that menu that was passed to this. If self.submenu is equal to menu, you see how there's two equal signs here? Two equal signs. So one equal sign means we are setting this value to whatever this is. Two means we are checking if they are equal to each other. So basically, you can pretend that this is equals, if that makes sense. I'll go ahead and put a comment so that we can remember this. If if the submenu is equal to the menu, we are updating. Okay. Then we will do some brackets because we have a little bit of code to write. Self.m slider move over time. This is a HUD function that will slide it. Basically, instead of instantly setting its position, it'll wait a bit, however much we tell it to, and it'll interpolate or slide it to where we want it to go. So scroll delay. Sorry, that should be an underscore. And this will basically use our scroll delay as the time we want it to slide. This will just keep it clean to where when the user is holding down the button, they will automatically have it slid to where it needs to be by the time they're ready to press the button again. You want a menu to be snappy and responsive and not have them waiting for things. And if you were to put a 0 delay, it would be too snappy, but you can work around it. Just kind of play with it. Set parent self.mText value. Self.mSlider, set parent self.mText value. mText, if you remember, is our menu text. It is our options, and this is going to set the parent of the slider to this text. And this is actually something new that I haven't seen done in any other menus, but it's actually a really easy way to handle a slider. So the game will, by default, update the position of the element to the position of the parent. So if you set the parent of the slider or the scroll bar to the text and just have it at a 0 offset, it will automatically put itself where it needs to be. So I think that's actually a really clean way of handling sliding. Let's go ahead and add the remaining functions we are missing. So we need to do get max cursor. Hopefully I haven't made any typos so far. That would really suck. We're just going to return 9 for now. And we're going to put it to do here because we are going to do this part after we have the options being able to be added, which will probably be within a couple videos. It just depends on how fast things go and how simple we make the menu. Then we need to update some stuff in here. We need to do, first of all, I is less than equal to self get max cursor. This is because this will allow us to change the size of the menu and the number of options without actually changing this for loop. Then we can do this m slider equals self icon. Okay, we're going to change these two values to 0 and 0. This is because we are now going to use the set parent setup, and we can go ahead and remove these because the defaults are center in my utility. We will then also go ahead and do self.mSlider set parent self.mText self get cursor. We don't need to pass menu because it's by default our current menu. Okay. And let's go ahead and double check this. That looks fine to me. All right, let's go ahead and check our syntax. It looks good. By the way, I want to show you all something cool with infinity letter. So if you have a bad syntax, like let's delete that. If you see right here, you actually get an icon telling you where the syntax error is. If I fix it, you see it goes back to GSC, and I thought that was pretty cool. I found that out recently. There's also some other cool features that we'll eventually use, like navigate to definition and stuff like that, but for now we don't need it. I have my Model Warfare 3 a little bit off screen, so let me put that over here. You will notice that the position of the menu changed recently. I don't like how that option like spawned in really weirdly in the screen, so we're going to fix that. But yeah, you can see we can now scroll and it loops back around. We'll eventually do infinite scrolling, and we'll do some cool stuff like resizing the menu based on the number of options, but for now, that's kind of out of the scope of this series because we want to start with a basic menu base. But yeah, like I said, you will notice that the base has actually moved a bit since the last one. I haven't changed the numbers, and what happened is because we no longer use the adjustable point, it's because of how the utility changed. So your menu might be a little bit closer to the center of the screen now or a little bit further out, so you might have to play around with that, but you just have to change the values of it, so it's not too big of a deal. Anyway, let's go ahead and fix that issue. So if you notice, whenever we open the menu, when the slider is drawn, it actually goes and starts at the center of the screen and then heads over to the right where it should be. The reason it does that is because the parent is actually being set to the cursor position after the element is drawn. And the way we can fix that is by actually doing, we can do x, or we'll do slider x equals self.mtext get cursor.x, slider y equals dot y. This is pretty bad code, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is just do corrupt equals this, and we'll go ahead and move this in. For any of you guys wondering, it is actually a lot more efficient to not have to rewrite stuff like this over and over again, so it's best to just go ahead and use local variables as much as you can, because they will save bytecode space too, which is the size of your GSC. Let's go ahead and change this 0, 0 to slider x and slider y. And I will go ahead and say I haven't tried this yet. I didn't notice this issue when I wrote the code the first time. I always do the code before the video and, set up the menu. But hopefully this will work out well, so I don't have to re-record. Okay. Ooh, that is not what we wanted. Oh, yeah, I know why. Okay. So this is even weirder. We can't do this. The original idea I had was to go ahead and change the position of this. So what I should be doing instead is actually doing self.m slider dot alpha equals 1, and then we are going to change the alpha to 0. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. That's changing the alpha back to 0 when it spawns in. Then we will change the alpha to the alpha we want after the element is at where it should be. And we will wait a frame for this to happen. And we can go ahead and get rid of this, this right here. And we can actually go ahead and put this back in set parent. Hopefully this will give you guys a preview as well into how I kind of debug GSC, because it is actually a skill you need to pick up to be able to find problems and fix them. Because if you don't learn how to do that, your projects will have a lot of brick walls you run into where it becomes really difficult, and you need to know how to debug things. It's still happening. I'll play around with it outside of the video because it's already been 18 minutes and I don't want to waste your time, but I will figure out how to fix this and we will fix it in the next video. It's also not too big of a deal. It's not too noticeable. And it seems to only be when the menu is drawn the very first time. As you can see, like, it looks good whenever... So it may be something to do with the layout. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. I know we went over a lot of stuff in this video and we went kind of quickly, so... and that's going to be a common theme from here on out. There's just a lot to cover, and Menubase is kind of complicated. But I can obviously answer questions and then answer questions in the next video as well. So, anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.